On September 1st, 1524, Desiderius Erasmus of Rotterdam, a Roman Catholic apologist, published a work entitled Diatribe Concerning Free Will. Martin Luther, the German reformer, responded with On the Enslaved Will, or The Bondage of the Will, a masterful apologetic that referenced over 300 Bible verses. Luther maintained the full Augustinian position against the semi-Pelagian position of Erasmus. It would be difficult to overstate the significance of this book. Luther considered it to be his most important work because it spoke to the issues that went to the very heart of what it meant to be a Christian. Dr. B.B. Warfield, the great Princeton theologian, called The Bondage of the Will the manifesto of the Protestant Reformation. Luther's book drew a line in the sand between the Roman Catholic view of justification and the Reformed view, and the debate that followed became known as the Monergistic Synergistic controversy.
When Erasmus wrote his diatribe on free will, he was writing this against Martin Luther. The church had really knew that Luther was making some inroads, and so they wanted the greatest continental humanist to take aim at Luther. Erasmus hesitated for a long time, but finally he found what he thought he could conscientiously focus on, and that was Luther's recapture of Augustinian thought that we are absolutely and utterly dependent upon the sovereign working of God and that we have nothing to contribute to our own salvation. And so in this book, Erasmus opted for a view of salvation that says that God offers us grace, but we still have some elements of freedom within us by which we can either choose this grace or reject this grace. And it is our choice that God rewards then with salvation.
Erasmus's main thesis in his treatment of the will, this diatribe on the will, is that man has the ability to initiate the relationship with God through faith in Jesus Christ. He has the ability within himself to believe, and through that faith then access all that goes with faith in justification and reconciliation with God.
Dr. Askell explains the semi-Pelagian view of synergism.
Synergism comes from a compound word in Greek, together, working together, and it basically teaches that man and God cooperate in the initiation of faith, that man does his part, God does his part, and so it's a cooperative work.
The prefix syn means with or together with, at the same time. It refers to two or more. It's used in words like synchronized. Ergos is a Greek word for work. In theological terms, as Dr. Askell has already noted, synergism refers to divine and human cooperation. God and man work together to bring about the latter's conversion. Martin Luther saw this as little more than a works-based salvation, dressed up in evening clothes. Luther believed the semi-Pelagianism of Erasmus denied original sin, the full impact the fall had on man. Instead of being dead in his trespasses and sins, man was, according to Erasmus, only wounded, and therefore could help himself by helping God. Luther understood that Erasmus' view made the grace of God a reward for our faith. In other words, man believes the gospel, and as a result of his good work, God gives him grace. And no matter how you slice it, in the end, man deserves some of the credit or the glory for his salvation.
And so it was the glory of God that was at stake in this view of salvation, according to Luther.
Against the synergistic view of Erasmus, Luther believed that being born again or born from above was monergistic. Mono is the Greek word meaning one or alone. It's the prefix for words like monotheism, the belief in one God. Monergism then was the belief that regeneration or the new birth was to be understood as the work of God alone. Because man was dead in trespasses and sin, it was God and only God who brought man back to life, sending His Spirit to revive, regenerate, and resurrect man from the hopeless condition of spiritual death. It may be helpful at this point to briefly explain that the terms born again and what we deem as salvation or justification are not synonymous terms. Many modern-day Christians equate the two. Luther emphatically taught that fallen man does not have faith in order to be born again, but that man is born again by the Spirit and the Word, and as a result, has faith.
Luther rightly understood that when the Bible describes the condition of man in sin, it is a desperate condition. Man in sin is not just sick, he is dead. A sick man can help himself a little bit, but a dead man needs a supernatural, miraculous work of grace to bring him back to life. Luther recognized that, and that's why in his Bondage on the Will, he considered this to be the most important, significant work that he did, the most important book he ever wrote. And it's also why in the conclusion of that book, he thanks Erasmus for writing against his view and commending the freedom of the will. He says, "Erasmus, you of all my opponents have really seen the issue. This is the hinge on which all else turns." Luther understood that it's not enough to advocate sola fide, faith alone. But sola fide also is dependent upon sola gratia, grace alone. And the faith which we exercise in Jesus Christ is itself a gift of God. And it is produced in us by the work of the Spirit.